I'll never forget the day my son, Jack, walked out of my life. It was 7 years ago, and I was devastated. I had given Jack everything he ever wanted, but it was never enough. He always wanted more, and I was more than happy to provide. But one day, Jack just disappeared. No phone calls, no visits, no nothing. I was left with a broken heart and a deep sense of regret. Years went by, and I heard rumors that Jack was doing well for himself. He had a good job, a nice house, and a beautiful family. But I couldn't shake the feeling that Jack was hiding something from me. And then, one day, I received a mysterious letter in the mail. It was from Jack, and all it said was meet me at the old warehouse at 5 p.m. Come alone. I was nervous, but I knew I had to go. I arrived at the warehouse, and Jack was already there, waiting for me. He looked different, older, and wiser. But there was something in his eyes that I couldn't quite read. What do you want, Jack? I asked, trying to hide my emotions. I know about the $120,000, Dad, he said, his voice cold and calculated. I know you've been hiding it from me all these years. I was taken aback, but I tried to remain calm. What are you talking about, Jack? I asked, trying to play dumb. Don't play dumb with me, Dad, Jack said, his voice rising. I know all about the money. And I want it. I was shocked, but I tried to reason with him. Jack, that money is for your future, for your family's future. It's not for you to waste on your selfish desires. You're not my father, Jack spat, his face twisted in anger. You're just a stranger who's been hiding the truth from me my whole life. I was speechless, but then Jack revealed his shocking plan. To be continued. I was speechless, but then Jack revealed his shocking plan. He wanted me to sign over the $120,000 to him, and in return, he would forgive me for my past mistakes. I was taken aback by his audacity, but I tried to remain calm. Jack, I understand that you're upset, but this isn't the way to resolve things, I said, trying to reason with him. There's no other way, Dad, Jack said, his voice cold and detached. You've had your chance to make things right, and you blew it. Now it's my turn. I felt a surge of anger at his words, but I tried to keep my cool. I knew that I had to think clearly and come up with a plan to defuse the situation. Jack, I'm not going to sign over the money to you, I said, trying to sound firm but calm. It's not just about the money, it's about the principle. I worked hard for that money, and I'm not going to let you take it from me without a fight. Jack's face twisted in anger, and he took a step closer to me. You're not going to fight me, Dad, he said, his voice dripping with malice. You're going to do what I say, or else. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized the true extent of Jack's anger and resentment. I knew that I had to be careful, or things could escalate quickly. Or else what, Jack? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Jack smiled, a cold and calculating smile. Or else I'll make sure that everyone knows the truth about you, Dad, he said. I'll make sure that everyone knows what you've been hiding all these years. I felt a surge of fear at his words, and I knew that I had to think fast. I couldn't let Jack expose my secrets, not now, not ever. Jack, please, I said, trying to appeal to whatever humanity was left in him. Don't do this. Let's talk about this, let's work something out. But Jack just laughed, a cold and mirthless sound. You're too late for that, Dad, he said. It's too late for apologies and regrets. It's time for action. And with that, Jack turned and walked away, leaving me feeling stunned and helpless. I knew that I had to do something, but I didn't know what. I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare, and I couldn't wake up. As I stood there, trying to make sense of what had just happened, I heard a noise behind me. I turned to see a figure emerging from the shadows. It was a woman, tall and imposing, with a look of determination on her face. She walked towards me, her eyes fixed on mine. Can I help you? I asked, trying to sound calm. My name is Sarah, she said, her voice firm and confident. I'm a friend of Jack's. And I'm here to make sure that you do what he says. I felt a surge of fear at her words, and I knew that I was in grave danger. I was trapped, with no way out. "What do you want me to do?" I asked, trying to sound calm. Sarah smiled, a cold and calculating smile. "I want you to sign over the $120,000 to Jack," she said. "And I want you to do it now." I felt a surge of anger at her words, and I knew that I had to resist. I couldn't let her and Jack bully me into doing something that I didn't want to do. "I'm not going to do it," I said, trying to sound firm. Sarah's smile grew wider, and she took a step closer to me. "Oh, I think you will," she said. "You see, I have something that you want. Something that will make you do exactly what I say." And with that, Sarah reached into her pocket and pulled out a small piece of paper. She unfolded it, and I saw that it was a photograph. It was a photograph of my granddaughter, Emily. She was a sweet and innocent child, and I loved her more than anything in the world. Sarah's eyes locked onto mine, and I saw a glint of malice in them. "You see, I have Emily," she said. "And if you don't do what I say, I'll make sure that she pays the price." I felt a surge of fear and anger at her words, and I knew that I had to act fast. I couldn't let her hurt Emily, not for anything in the world. But what could I do? I was trapped, with no way out. And Sarah seemed to know exactly what she was doing. As I stood there, frozen in fear and uncertainty, Sarah took a step closer to me. "So, what's it going to be?" she asked, her voice dripping with malice. "Are you going to sign over the $120,000, or are you going to risk losing Emily forever?" I felt like I was being squeezed from all sides. Sarah's words were like a vice, tightening around my heart and squeezing the life out of me. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. All I could do was stare at the photograph of Emily, my sweet and innocent granddaughter. I couldn't let anything happen to her. I would do anything to protect her. "Okay," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'll sign over the money." Sarah's smile grew wider, and she took a step closer to me. "I knew you'd see it my way," she said, her voice dripping with triumph. She pulled out a pen and a piece of paper, and I signed over the $120,000 without hesitation. As I handed the paper back to her, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. At least Emily was safe. But as I looked into Sarah's eyes, I saw something there that made my blood run cold. It was a glint of malice, a spark of cruelty. And I knew that I had just made a terrible mistake. "You're not going to hurt Emily, are you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Sarah's smile grew even wider, and she leaned in close to me. "Oh, I'm not going to hurt her," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "At least, not yet." I felt a surge of fear at her words, and I knew that I had to get Emily away from her. But how? I was trapped, with no way out. And Sarah seemed to know exactly what she was doing. As I stood there, frozen in fear and uncertainty, Sarah turned and walked away. I watched her go, my heart heavy with worry. What was I going to do? How was I going to get Emily away from her? I knew that I had to act fast, but I didn't know what to do. I was trapped, with no way out. As I stood there, trying to think of a plan, I heard a noise behind me. I turned to see Jack walking towards me, a smug look on his face. Well, he said, his voice dripping with triumph. "Looks like you're not as smart as you thought you were, Dad." I felt a surge of anger at his words, and I knew that I had to keep my cool. I couldn't let him get to me, not now. "What do you want, Jack?" I asked, trying to sound calm. "I just wanted to come and gloat," he said, his voice dripping with malice. "I knew you'd fall for it, Dad. I knew you'd sign over the money without a fight." I felt a surge of shame at his words, and I knew that I had to admit the truth. I had been outsmarted, outmaneuvered. And now, I was paying the price. "You won, Jack," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Congratulations." Jack's smile grew even wider, and he leaned in close to me. "It's not over yet, Dad," he said, his voice dripping with malice. "Not by a long shot." And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving me feeling defeated and helpless. I knew that I had to get Emily away from Sarah, but I didn't know how. I was trapped, with no way out. And Jack and Sarah seemed to know exactly what they were doing. As I stood there, trying to think of a plan, I heard a noise behind me. I turned to see a figure emerging from the shadows. It was a woman, tall and imposing, with a look of determination on her face. She walked towards me, her eyes fixed on mine. "My name is Rachel," she said, her voice firm and confident. "I'm a detective. And I'm here to help you." I felt a surge of hope at her words, and I knew that I had to trust her. But could I? I felt a surge of hope at Rachel's words, and I knew that I had to trust her. But could I? I didn't know anything about her, or what her motives were. But I was desperate, and I knew that I had to take a chance. "What do you know about Jack and Sarah?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Rachel's eyes narrowed, and she took a step closer to me. "I've been investigating them for months," she said, her voice low and urgent. "They're involved in some shady dealings, and I think they're using Emily as leverage." I felt a surge of fear at her words, and I knew that I had to act fast. "What can we do?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. Rachel's eyes locked onto mine, and I saw a glint of determination in them. "We can take them down," she said, her voice firm and confident. "But we need to be careful. They're not going to go down without a fight." I felt a surge of adrenaline at her words, and I knew that I was ready to do whatever it took to save Emily. "Let's do it," I said, my voice firm and resolute. Rachel nodded, and we began to make a plan. We would gather evidence, and build a case against Jack and Sarah. We would take them down, and we would save Emily. But as we were making our plan, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see Jack or Sarah lurking in the shadows. But there was never anyone there. I tried to shake off the feeling, but it only seemed to get worse. I knew that we were taking a risk, but I also knew that we had to try. We couldn't just sit back and let Jack and Sarah get away with what they were doing. As we were finalizing our plan, Rachel's phone rang. She answered it, and I could see the tension in her body. "What is it?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. Rachel's eyes locked onto mine, and I saw a glint of fear in them. "It's the police," she said, her voice low and urgent. "They've received a tip that Emily is in danger. We have to get to her, now." I felt a surge of fear at her words, and I knew that we had to act fast. We grabbed our things, and we ran out of the room. We were in a desperate race against time, and we knew that we had to save Emily before it was too late. As we were running, I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. I was scared, but I was also determined. I knew that we had to save Emily, no matter what it took. We finally arrived at the location, and I could see that it was an abandoned warehouse. I felt a surge of fear at the sight of it, but I knew that we had to go inside. Rachel took the lead, and we crept into the warehouse. It was dark and deserted, and I could feel the tension in the air. Suddenly, I heard a noise. It was a faint cry, and it was coming from the back of the warehouse. "Emily?" I called out, trying to keep my voice calm. The cry came again, and I knew that we had to move fast. We crept towards the sound, our hearts pounding in our chests. As we were getting closer, I could see that there was a figure tied up in the corner. It was Emily, and she was crying. I felt a surge of relief at the sight of her, but I also knew that we were not out of danger yet. Jack and Sarah could still be lurking in the shadows, waiting to strike. We had to get Emily out of there, and we had to do it fast. I rushed towards Emily, my heart racing with excitement and fear. I quickly untied her, and she fell into my arms, sobbing uncontrollably. I held her tightly, trying to comfort her, but I knew that we couldn't stay there for long. Jack and Sarah could return at any moment, and we had to get out of there before they did. Rachel helped me to my feet, and we quickly made our way towards the door. But as we were leaving, I heard a noise behind us. It was the sound of footsteps, heavy and deliberate. I knew that Jack and Sarah had returned, and they were not happy. I turned to see them standing in the doorway, their faces twisted with anger and hatred. "You'll never leave this place alive," Jack spat, his eyes blazing with fury. I knew that we had to act fast, or we would be trapped. I pushed Emily behind me, and Rachel stood beside me, her eyes locked on Jack and Sarah. "We're not going to let you hurt us," she said, her voice firm and resolute. Jack sneered at her, but I could see the fear in his eyes. He knew that we were not going to go down without a fight. Sarah, on the other hand, seemed to be enjoying the situation. She was smiling, a cold and calculating smile, and her eyes were gleaming with excitement. I knew that she was the more dangerous of the two, and I had to be careful. I took a step forward, trying to reason with them. "Listen, Jack, Sarah, we don't have to do this. We can work something out." But Jack just laughed, a cold and mirthless sound. "You think you can reason with us?" he said. "You think you can just talk your way out of this?" I knew that I had to think fast, or we would be in grave danger. I looked around the room, trying to find something, anything, that could help us. And then I saw it. A fire extinguisher, hanging on the wall. I knew that it was our only chance. I grabbed the extinguisher, and Rachel followed my lead. We stood back to back, ready to face whatever came next. Jack and Sarah began to move towards us, their eyes blazing with anger and hatred. I knew that we were in for the fight of our lives. I raised the extinguisher, ready to strike. But as I looked at Jack and Sarah, I saw something that made my blood run cold. They were not alone. There was someone else in the room, someone who had been hiding in the shadows. And they were not happy. I saw a figure emerge from the shadows, a tall and imposing figure with a face that was twisted with anger and hatred. It was a woman, with long and flowing hair, and eyes that seemed to bore into my soul. She was dressed in a long and flowing cloak, and she seemed to be radiating an aura of power and menace. I knew that we were in grave danger, and I raised the extinguisher, ready to defend ourselves. But as I looked at the woman, I saw something that made my blood run cold. She was not just any ordinary woman. She was someone who had been thought to be dead for years. Someone who had been presumed to be gone forever. But now, she was standing in front of me, alive and well. And she was not happy. "You," she spat, her eyes blazing with anger and hatred. "You're the one who's been causing all the trouble." I knew that I had to be careful, that I had to tread carefully. But I also knew that I had to stand my ground, that I had to defend myself and those I loved. "Who are you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The woman smiled, a cold and calculating smile. "I'm someone who's been wronged," she said. "Someone who's been hurt by you and your family." I knew that I had to be careful, that I had to think carefully. But I also knew that I had to act fast, that I had to do something to protect myself and those I loved. "What do you want?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The woman laughed, a cold and mirthless sound. "I want revenge," she said. "I want to make you pay for what you've done." I knew that I was in grave danger, that I had to think fast. I raised the extinguisher, ready to strike. But as I looked at the woman, I saw something that made my blood run cold. She was not alone. There were others with her, others who were just as angry and just as vengeful. And they were all moving towards us, their eyes blazing with hatred and anger. I knew that we were in for the fight of our lives. I knew that we had to defend ourselves, that we had to fight back. But I also knew that we were outnumbered, that we were outgunned. And I knew that our chances of survival were slim. I raised the extinguisher, ready to strike. But as I looked at the woman and her cohorts, I knew that I was in for the fight of my life. I was in for a battle that would test my strength, my courage, and my wits. And I was not sure if I would emerge victorious. The woman took a step closer to me, her eyes blazing with anger and hatred. "You're going to pay for what you've done," she spat. "You're going to pay dearly." I raised the extinguisher, ready to strike. But as I looked at the woman, I knew that I was in for the fight of my life. And I was not sure if I would emerge victorious. As the woman took another step closer to me, I could feel my heart racing with fear and adrenaline. I knew that I had to act fast, that I had to defend myself and those I loved. I raised the extinguisher, ready to strike, and prepared for the worst. But just as the woman was about to attack, Rachel intervened, using her own strength and courage to hold her back. "Don't do this," Rachel said, her voice firm and resolute. "Don't let your anger and hatred consume you." The woman struggled against Rachel's grip, but she was no match for her. Rachel was determined to protect me and Emily, and she would stop at nothing to do so. As the woman struggled, I saw something in her eyes that gave me hope. It was a glimmer of recognition, a spark of understanding. And in that moment, I knew that I had to act. I took a step forward, and looked the woman straight in the eye. "I know what you're going through," I said, my voice filled with compassion and understanding. "I know what it's like to feel hurt and angry and betrayed. But I also know that you don't have to let those feelings consume you. You don't have to let them destroy you." The woman looked at me, her eyes searching for something. And then, in a moment of clarity, she saw it. She saw the truth, the reality of her situation. And in that moment, she was free. She was free from the anger and hatred that had consumed her, free from the pain and suffering that had driven her. And in that moment, she was able to let go. She was able to forgive, to release the past and move on. And as she did, I saw a weight lift off her shoulders. I saw a sense of peace and calm wash over her, a sense of resolution and closure. And in that moment, I knew that we were all free. We were free from the cycle of anger and hatred, free from the pain and suffering that had driven us. And in that moment, we were able to start anew. We were able to start fresh, to begin again with a sense of hope and possibility. As the woman turned and walked away, I felt a sense of peace and calm wash over me. I knew that we had finally found closure, that we had finally found the justice and resolution we had been seeking. And as I looked at Rachel and Emily, I knew that we were all going to be okay. We were going to be okay, because we had each other. We had each other, and we had the truth. And in the end, that was all that mattered. As we walked out of the warehouse, I felt a sense of hope and possibility that I had never felt before. I knew that we had been through a lot, that we had faced some of the darkest and most difficult moments of our lives. But I also knew that we had come out stronger, that we had come out more resilient and more determined. And as we walked into the bright sunlight, I knew that we were ready for whatever came next. We were ready to face the future, to face the challenges and opportunities that lay ahead. And we were ready to do it together, as a family. As we walked, I put my arm around Emily and pulled her close. I looked at Rachel and smiled, feeling a sense of gratitude and appreciation for her bravery and strength. And I knew that we were all going to be okay. We were all going to be okay, because we had each other. And we had the truth.